Good evening. My name is Alice Knapp. I'm CEO of the Ferguson Library, and you are in for a fantastic evening. I've been reading John Searles ever since his first book, and of course, I've been reading Kate White ever since her first book. So it's just gonna be delightful. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the Friends of the Ferguson Library. And this year, the Friends of the Ferguson Library received a Friends of the Connecticut Libraries Award for their special work on Friends Stand Against Racism. And this is a project that they've been working on for the past 2 years, which has included a reading lists, workshops, and author visits coming to the library. And I'm just delighted that they've won this award this year. But what they do for us at the Ferguson Library is they're that special sauce that brings special programs to us, like tonight's event. And they also raise money for us so that we can do more programming and special programs, such as our baby story times, our early childhood literacy routine. They bought our purple bus so we can bring kids from the schools to the library. So if you're not a member of the Friends, please join the Friends now. And also, we work very closely with Elm Street Books. And if you would like to buy a copy of tonight's book, please reach out to Elm Street, and they will have copies for you there. Without further ado, I would like to hand this over to Barbara Thomas, who has been with us for several years and has been responsible for all of our great author programs. And you're on mute.
Yes, I just noticed that. Thank you, Alice. Thank you. It's been so great working with the Ferguson all these years. And thank you so much to Kate and to John for being here tonight, and for Kate for agreeing to interview John for this special Friends Virtual Author Series program. Before I hand it over to you, Kate, let me tell our audience a little something about you. We're so happy to welcome you back to the Ferguson Library. Kate is a New York Times bestselling author of standalone thrillers. I just lost my sheet, I'm sorry. The Fiancé, Have You Seen Me, The Secrets You Keep, among others, as well as 8 Bailey Wagons mysteries. Her next book, The Second Husband, publishes in June. Kate is also the author of several popular career books for women, including I Shouldn't Be Telling You This, and editor of the Anthony and Agatha Award nominated The Mystery Writers of America cookbook. For 14 years, Kate served as the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan, which under her became the most successful magazine in single copy sales in the United States. Today, she'll be talking with best-selling author and former Cosmo colleague, John Searles, about his new book, Her Last Affair. It is my pleasure to introduce Kate White, who will be in conversation with John Searles.
Thank you, Barbara. As Barbara said, I have had the pleasure of speaking a couple of times at Ferguson, which is just the most incredible librarian. As the daughter of a librarian, I've set the bar very high with libraries, and I just love it there. And it's really a treat for me tonight to be having a slightly different role, and that is to interview one of my favorite authors and one of my favorite people I've ever worked with, John Searles. John is a New York Times bestselling and award-winning writer. His books are published in over a dozen languages and have been voted best of the year or top picks by Boston Globe, Entertainment Weekly, Salon, and the American Library Association. The film adaptation of his novel Strange But True is currently streaming on HBO Max, and it is just an awesome movie. And we're going to circle back to that in a little while. But we're really here tonight to focus on John's new novel, Her Last Affair. It has been praised as delightfully creepy by people, a tense, intricately woven tale of heartbreak, retribution, and redemption by Publishers Weekly, and a twisted thriller that explores despair and loneliness with cinematic flair by Kirkus. And they don't like to give good reviews to anybody, it seems. So, John, first of all, congratulations on your amazing, gripping book, Her Last Affair. I'm so excited to be interviewing you tonight. Why don't you start, for anyone who's joined us who hasn't read it, why don't you start by telling us about it, tantalize those who have yet to purchase it or check it out of the library?
Well, I first have to say what a pleasure it is to be here with Kate White. Kate and I, as Barbara said, Kate ran Cosmo so successfully. It's the #1 magazine for years because of her, and we worked together. And so many mornings you would find us in Kate's office working on those outlandish Cosmo cover lines together. So if we veer off from this discussion into something like, I don't know, 99 ways to something.
Or, John, how about mattress move so hot his thighs will burst into flames? You know, how about that one?
Exactly. So forgive us, everyone, if we veer off maybe a little more lusty. Anyway, so Her Last Affair is a book that is set at an old abandoned drive-in movie theater. It's a mix of genres. My books are kind of classified as thrillers, but I don't really think of them as thrillers. I just write stories. And it's told 3 seemingly separate storylines, that it's kind of a puzzle piece. The reader doesn't really know how they're meant to go together. And then about a little more than halfway through the book, the storylines collide and come together, and then it ratchets up into a very much more thrillery kind of paced book. And it's a book about lost love, about nostalgia, about the power of the past and its ability to impact our lives for both good and bad. And it's an unusual, quote, thriller. It's not the sort of, typical whodunit sort of book or anything like that. I hope people like it.
John, I loved it. And it's interesting because, I think sometimes people have called you a thriller writer, and you're not per se. All 4 of your books, starting with Boy Still Missing, Strange But True, Help for the Haunted, and now Her Last Affair, even though they might not be thrillers per se, they all have intrigue or mystery or suspense as woven into them. But what makes this one a little bit different than those, at least from my view, is that it's got this dark humor to it that is really great. And I heard you say recently that someone had told you that the tone reminded them a little bit of Fargo, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, and you like that. And tell us a little bit about what it was like to add dark humor, and why you decided to have to do something like that, and why being told the tone is like Fargo was a real compliment for you.
What's funny, Kate, is whenever I handed my pages to my editor for my previous books, I would say to her, "Isn't it hilarious?" And she's like, "No, not at all. You have dead parents. You have this dark things happening in the basement and spooky." This time she called me, my editor, and said, "Actually, it's really funny in places." And it was such a compliment to me, because I wanted there to be humor, because I think that's like life. It's like there's, sadness, there's humor, there's, mystery, there's suspicion, all of those things. And so I think it was a gentleman interviewing me from Newsday who said the tone reminded him of Fargo, in that it has all different sorts of tones. Remember how Fargo has those really quirky, unusual, eccentric characters,
Yeah.
really sinister and dark, but then it's also really weirdly funny at the same time at moments, and poignant. And he was a big bless you if that was a sneeze, or bless you anyway, if whatever that was. But anyway, he was a big fan of the book, and it was such a compliment to me, because I just sit down and write the best stories I can, and I don't really think about how they're going to be categorized or the genre. But when he said Fargo, I was like, I love that movie because of all the reasons I've just said. And so it was a real compliment to me. And, this book, even though it's 3 separate storylines that come together halfway through. The main sort of narrator of the story is a woman named Skyla Hull, who's this very odd, eccentric nurse, sort of in the vein of Annie Wilkes from Misery, or maybe Nurse Ratched, but she's her own ball of trouble and kookiness. And I wanted her to be a little difficult to maybe to understand, but by the end, hopefully, when you know her story and what happened to her, you feel for her and kind of see her differently by the end.
Yeah, and I certainly did. And I do think what's interesting today about a lot of fiction and also what we're watching on Netflix is that we're presented sometimes with characters who aren't perfect, who do have a dark side, like in Ozark, but we still find ourselves rooting for them. And even your characters in this book who weren't as sympathetic as Skyla, I still found myself really intrigued with them and fascinated. And I didn't mind that they had a dark side. One of the things I love about the book, John, there's just so many rich details and observations about life. There's one that's in the beginning that you come back to later, but I just laughed out loud when I read this one. Linnell, one of the other characters, female characters, is noticing in her kitchen all the little signs around the kitchen, and there's the wood hanging that says cook, and the mugs that say drink, and then the sign above the wine rack that says uncork the vino. And she has this irritated thought that they're all orders. We're being told cook, uncork the vino.
Yeah.
And that is just one of so many observations that I realized that as an author, you had a moment where you observed something like that. And I wondered, do you save those kinds of observations as they occur to you in a digital file and then start to think of them when you're writing, or do they just get stored in your brain and as you're writing, they come out?
Well, thank you for noticing that, Kate, and pointing that. But for me, and you tell me if it's the same for you, sometimes they just get stored in my brain. But I always joke, as a gay man myself, the cliche is a gay man knows how to decorate. And I got screwed out of the decorating gene that other gay men have. I don't know. Maybe my house, that's a pretty.
No, John, your apartment is so fantastic. Stop.
It took years to get it together. But I always joke about that. So there was a phase, our apartment during the writing of this book burned down. And there was a phase where I was having to decorate the apartment. And I would find myself sometimes in Home Goods or places like that. And they have these displays of all these decorations where everything is labeled and every pillow. And by the way, if you have this in your home, please don't throw it out of my account. Don't be offended. It was just a trend I noticed that I never saw before. Everything was my happy place, life is good. And then the orders like eat, drink, and the labels for everything, fork, knife, cup. And I just thought it seemed so, again, I don't have a mind for decorating, but I thought, what an interesting trend that everything is labeled. And I thought, wouldn't it be funny if this character Linnell, who is one of the three seemingly separate storylines, is told from Linnell's perspective, and she's kind of a housewife, an empty nester. Her daughter's off at college, and she's just recently been, quote, canceled for this seemingly innocuous photo from her youth that surfaces on the internet. And she's fired from her job as an art teacher, and she's in a bad marriage. Her daughter left early for this program overseas a year earlier, and she's just bored, and her only source of joy is an online affair that she's hesitant to have, but with her very first love. And she hadn't heard from him in years, and then one morning she gets a Facebook message that says, "I never stopped thinking about you all these years." And anyway, her house has just been redecorated by her husband's colleague, and it has all these signs all over the place, and she just feels completely at sea and doesn't even like where she lives anymore. But her source of joy is connecting with her very first love online. And I think during the pandemic, a lot of people were connecting with people from their past. I don't know if you had that experience, but old friends, not necessarily first loves, but I think there was a lot of that kind of nostalgia and reconnection on my mind when I was working on this book.
Yeah, I would say for me too, I did once try to have a digital file where I kept things.
I thought you were gonna say a digital affair.
Uh, and but I found that then I would forget to look at it. Mostly this stuff just kind of comes to you as you're writing. There's an interesting quote in the book where late in the book where the character Jeremy, who had written an unpublished novel, says to someone, people always assume the things a novelist puts down on the page are the truth of his or her life. When that goes against the very definition of fiction in the first place. Now, my guess, though, is you don't firmly believe that, because all authors borrow from their own lives, right? But as I was thinking about this, I thought, there's a continuum to that. I mean, some authors must do it more than others. And it made me think a little bit about how you hear actors talking about method acting, and some actors are method actors, and they when they break for lunch, they're still in the accent, they're still in character. Where some of the Succession, and we'll touch on Succession later, some of the actors in that show have been a little annoyed with one of their colleagues because he's always doing the method thing. And one of them said, acting's pretending. If you had to think about that a little bit in terms of your writing, are you more a method actor author where you dive deep, or are you more of a pretender? I mean, how much do you feel you really need to go into your own life, or do you just borrow little snippets from your life?
I think what happens is my real life gets tangled up in my imagination, and then I end up going kind of deep with what I imagine and getting really focused and kind of, not to sound too artsy, but like in kind of a creative trance about it. That sounds weird, but do you have that experience, Kate, with you?
Well, you mean a trance where you just almost feel so in the zone? John, you're scaring me, please.
Exactly. Hold on, it's happening. Just really, really focus. I think that's why lately I find mornings such a good time to write. It's so quiet. It's not a lot of emails. Half the time I don't even turn on my phone. I just lately start working the first few, I drink coffee and just kind of work, and then start the day, because just quieting the other outside voices helps me to work. And again, because I don't really write to a specific genre or specific formula, a lot of times I'm just finding my way with these stories, and there's a lot of trial and error. And with Jeremy in particular, it's funny, I never picture actors when I write books ever. But with him, I often pick, with Jeremy, he's kind of this sad sack of a guy, but in some ways, I hope you kind of feel for him in moments too. And
Oh, I did.
picture Paul Giamatti in Sideways, like it's like he stole money from his mother when he stopped home, and like he did so many unlikable things, but yet I don't know why that movie you still cared about him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you find, like, one of the magical things about writing, I find, is that I sketch a few chapters out at a time, and I'm always sort of know where I'm going at the end, but that you're just sitting there and something comes out of your brain that you have no idea where it came from. And to me, that's so bizarre and magical. You think, I don't remember thinking that thought one step at a time. It just full blown out of my brain.
So it's a real combo of things. I think that's why when people ask that question, what do you call it, pantser or plotter?
A plotter or a pantser?
It depends on the week for me. Sometimes I out, and then other times I'm like, just kind of, like I said, trial and error and figuring things out. For this book, I had this idea of that Skyla, the main character, she was a nurse for many years, and now she's retired. And when the book opens, as you know, we learn that she ran this drive-in movie theater with her husband for 50 years. And a few nights before their golden anniversary, he dies in a freak accident out in the woods behind the drive-in. And I had this idea that she read romance novels when she worked the night shifts as a nurse. And at one point, the Lynette character asks her, well, what makes a good love story? And, for years at Cosmopolitan, I read so many romantic thrillers because we would excerpt them, which we can talk about. But and Skyla has this line where she says, well, I think the couple needs a unique how we met story. And then there be endless obstacles that make it seem as though they'll never be together. And then at the very last minute, in an unexpected twist, by some bit of magic, they end up together after all. And that is how I always saw those books, kind of how they were. And in this book, I had the idea that the very last minute, even though it's not a romance novel, but it is a book. It's not even a love story, but I would say it's a book that's about love in a dark way. That in the last minute there would be an unexpected twist. And I had it in my mind the whole time I was writing, and I didn't know if I could pull it off. And then when I got to that part and wrote it, and my editor loved it, and I felt really happy, and my early readers loved it, I felt really good about it, because it is kind of ends on a really hopeful note after such kind of a sinister, dark climax and everything. So,
you brought up something very important. Today, the twists in some books are getting so crazy and bizarre. It reminds me of like Jaws 9, where the shark comes out of the water and takes down the helicopter, I think. And do you feel any pressure, because readers, even in not just in thrillers, but all fiction, they're looking for twists? Do you feel pressure to make sure that you get a twist, but a twist that is credible? Or do you just say, hey, I'm just going to let the twist evolve, and I'm not going to care so much about what else is going on in other books out there?
I definitely just let the books evolve. And I think trying to think, well, Boys Till Missing had a twist. I remember now. Strange But True had a big twist, but I guess they just came naturally, because part of it as a writer, this, Kate, your books have lots of twists. You want to surprise your reader, but I don't know. There are so many wonderful thriller writers out there, so I don't want to say anything bad about any thriller books, but sometimes I do pick up books and I just find them, they seem to follow a real pattern, and they're not the twists are, as you say, Kate, are not always as surprising. They feel a little manufactured. So when someone has a twist that feels like it's organic to the story, you and I have talked about this, it just feels so satisfying as a reader.
Yeah. And how, as an author, what's the best way that you find to make sure that your twist the twists do feel organic?
I think I don't know. I mean, some people might read my book and say, or read Her Last Affair and see the twist. There are a lot of times I'm reading a book and I know what the twist is, I figure it out, but I still really enjoy the book. You have that experience too. Yeah. So I don't always count on that as a make or break for me. Like, if sometimes I kind of figure it out, but I enjoy the journey of it. But for me, I think that I try to let it come organically, and then it's a calibration thing, because I always joke with Thomas, my husband, who early on when we met 25 years ago, I was so young, I would get up and write from we go to bed, I'd get up 3 a.m, write till 5 and go back to sleep. And he was like, when do you write these books? I never actually see you. Now I joke, because I'm not as young anymore. I always joke that I say to him, come quick, I wrote a sentence. But I torture him into reading, and people in my life into reading. And if people say, oh, I figured it out or didn't figure out, then you kind of try to calibrate. Because in a book I wrote, Helpful the Haunted, I remember there's a twist at the end, and some people felt frustrated because I didn't mention the certain character enough. But my editor and I really went back and forth, because we counted the mentions, and the characters mentioned, I don't even remember now, 10 times. But we really cut some of the mentions, because you don't want to tip your hand too much. So it's hard to win, so you try to
Right. But I feel your twists are always really great. And it sounds like what you're saying is, organically, if they're character driven and really make sense in terms of the character, if they feel authentic with the character, then they're not going to seem far-fetched in terms of in the book. If they really have that organic, they're coming from the person. I wanted to ask you before we get to any questions from anyone who's listening and watching. You kind of touched on this a little bit, and I'm sure you get asked this a lot, as I do, but I know I always want to hear this from authors. Can you just give us a little bit about your routine? You said you drink, you got to get the coffee in there first, but what works for you as a routine to get you motivated, to get your butt in the chair and keep it there?
Changing, but I'm just glad I thought you were going to ask, can you tell us about your new book? And I hate that.
Yeah, I know.
I reading great books during the pandemic. I was telling you when we talked earlier today, that was a wonderful thing. I read tons of short stories because I think my attention span was not quite as what it normally is during the pandemic. So I read so much short fiction, novels too. But reading good writing always inspires me, so there's that. And just staying in the book. If I get too scattered and I'm out and about and stuff, it takes me a while to get back into it. So if I kind of quiet things, read good sentences, take walks, kind of stay in the work, that's good for me. I mean, I know other people really need the social engagement and the break and to be out and about for the inspiration, but kind of I've learned that about myself. It's better if I kind of just quiet everything and kind of get into the rhythm of it. But what about for you, Kate?
Well, for me, it sounds like even though you used to get up at 3 a.m, that now you're pretty much a morning person in terms of your writing.
Maybe 6. Yeah. You get up in the morning and do it too? Is that?
Yeah, the thing that was tricky for me is that I was always a night owl. I pretty much would go to bed at 1, and I wrote my first book was nonfiction, and my husband was anchoring an early morning newscast then. So the kids would go to bed at 9 and my husband had gone to bed at 7. So I wrote the book in the living room on my laptop, on my lap, with Law and Order reruns going in the background. I kind of have to thank Sam Watterson for that book. He was very influential. And then I get my first fiction contract, and I tried it and it didn't work. I couldn't write a line of fiction in the evening. And then I started experimenting on weekends before the kids got up, and I was like, oh no, I can do it in the morning. And then I realized I'm a night owl who's going to have to become a morning person. Yeah, so that was a big switch for me, that, I could still do some nonfiction stuff at night, but pretty much fiction I do in the morning. And one thing that's helped me actually is to go back in the afternoon and I can edit for an hour in the afternoon. I can't really write too much in the afternoon, but I can edit. And so that's been good for me to figure that out. I think, can I just ask, Alice, if there are any, I think I saw a question pop up, but will you be telling me what the questions are?
I see.
Yes, I definitely will. We do have a couple questions.
Okay, great. I want to save time definitely at the end to come to talk about this fabulous movie, Strange But True, on HBO Max, but let's hear some of the questions, Alice.
So the first question is, have any of your early readers influenced you to change any part of the book?
Yes, always. Oh my goodness. I have a very good friend who, one of my closest friends is still my best friend from 4th grade. Kate will know, once you're in my life, I don't let you go. So his wife, my best friend's from 4th grade's wife, also named Kate, is a nurse and was a nurse, an ER nurse during the pandemic. And she was reading this book for me, and Skyla, the main character, is a nurse. So she helped me with all the nursing things. And she also is a great reader and a writer herself. And so she read a bunch. She came over with a purse full of various syringes to show me, and we injected limes and then made margaritas after.
Oh, is that where you got all the nursing stuff in the book?
Yeah, from Kate O'Connell,
Oh.
her name. And she's wonderful. She's just such a great great person. And so she helped me, and I adjusted things because of her. There were certain things she told me, like half, when the site trade or something, you would call it the half-life is the term you would use, or so she adjusted things. And Jessica Knoll, who's also a writer and was my former assistant at Cosmo and worked for Kate, with Kate and I at Cosmo, she read an early draft, and actually the twist, she and I talked about it because she kind of saw it, and so therefore I calibrated and kind of pulled back some of the clues. And again, you're not going to please anyone, because you also have all those readers who want to figure it out and feel smart about it, so they want to say, oh, I figured it out. So you know, you do your best when you're writing these books, and that's how it goes. But I do have to say, I said we would say some stuff about our Cosmos stuff, so I will say this one thing. Kate, do you remember this? We used to have this section of the magazine called the Red Hot Read, and it was basically a sex scene from a romantic thriller every month. I called it the Blank of the Month Club. The Bop of the Month Club.
Yeah.
And so it was always like, you know, Virginia Snow had sworn off men. That is until she met Brick Steele, and now not a bodyguard, turned an NFL player, assigned to protect her. Anyway, I remember, Kate, do you remember this? Once we had a couple in this excerpt, and they have a tryst in the bedroom, and then in the bathroom, and then on the staircase. And I called it Bed, Bath, and Beyond Her Wildest Dreams. Kate loved it.
Oh, God.
Case that day from Kate, but we had to check with the legal department at Hearst to make sure we could use Bed, Bath, and Beyond, and it was not a problem, and we did. So
That's great. Can I just ask one little question on top of that question about your early readers? Because whoever asked that, I thought that's such a great question. John, when early readers tell you something, how do you know when it's something that is worth paying attention to, and how do you know when they're off base? Like, do you listen to your gut then, or what tells you they nailed it?
yeah, you just kind of know. I mean, especially if you give it to a few people and you hear the same thing.
Yeah.
You just kind of know. And you know, there are those times, you know, for this book, like I said, it's very much, it's hopefully fun for the reader in that it's a puzzle piece of 3 different storylines that come together. And so you have to be willing to engage in that way, because part of it is the reader engaging and questioning how it comes together. But one thing I did with this book was, because it's set in an old drive-in movie theater, I thought it needs something to give it kind of a little bit of cohesion or a sense to the reader that this is all part of one thing. So I had the idea during the writing of it, because it's set in an old drive-in movie theater, to put quotes from films that have once played at the drive-in, and for the quotes to act as clues to what's about to happen in the chapter, or a hint at the tone or mystery. And so that was so much fun to do, because some of the quotes are from Casablanca,
Yeah.
and then other ones are from like The Shining or Psycho, pardon me, and then other ones are like forgotten 80s fluff. Well, not forgotten by me, because I love movies like Mannequin or Cannonball Run.
Yeah, and there's one, I love this, One Final Thing I Have to Do, and Then I'll Be Free of the Past, from Vertigo. And I thought that was such a great touch, John.
So it signals to the reader, I hope, like, oh, this is all part of one thing. And what readers have told me when I've been on tour is, like, at first they weren't sure what the clues the quotes had to do with anything, and then they kind of got the rhythm of it and realized, oh, it's like a little hint about what they're about to read.
Yeah.
And so many people have said that that was one of their favorite parts of the book. And also it goes to the whole kind of film thing, because it's set at a theater, and you know, it's very much meant to be sort of, to in some ways, like a little bit of a nod to film noir, because I once heard Dennis Lehane say something about film noir. His definition was scuzzy people doing scuzzy things to each other. These are some dark characters.
Yeah.
I hope I showed that their hearts and
Yeah, you do. Alice, another question perhaps. Alice? Alice doesn't live here anymore?
Yeah.
No. Speaking of movies, there she is.
So one of the questions is about the drive-in movie theater. Why is that? Was it important to set the story there?
Well, whenever I go home to see my mom, we have a little house out in Sag Harbor, and when I'm driving to the Port Jeff Ferry, I pass an old sign for an abandoned drive-in movie theater, the Rocky Point Drive-In, and no one probably notices it but me. And I see it's all overgrown by trees, and there's a chain over the entrance, and I always just stare at it constantly, and I just would wonder about it. And so I at some point Googled the drive-in to see what it was like in its heyday. And then I ended up finding all these hundreds of images of all these old drive-in movie theaters all across the country, forgotten by time. And I thought the images were so evocative and beautiful, these tattered screens rising up toward the sky and the bent speaker poles and the little hills to park your car on. I thought it's so eerie and evocative. And since Stephen King didn't set a book there, I better hurry and do it fast. But I just thought it would make a great setting. And I don't know, I love kind of abandoned places and things like that. My mom, when I was growing up, there used to be this, on the walk to the library, there was this, she showed me one day this deadbolt that's locked to the guardrail, and she told me she put it there the day she graduated high school, and it was all rusted, and I was obsessed with it. I used to stare at it all the time walking to the library or walking to the Fireman's Field, the carnival, and I don't know, it just kind of made me think of what my mother was like when she graduated high school, and it overlooked, weirdly, this abandoned foundation, and I used to wonder about that house. And so I just kind of abandoned old places appeal to me. But what about you, Kate, with your new book? Tell me about the second husband. Like,
Well, can I just say one of my favorite pieces of nonfiction you wrote, where you stayed overnight in an abandoned, was it an insane asylum?
asylum. Yeah, it's called the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. I don't think they've used that term anymore.
But it was haunted, right? And you felt a presence there, didn't you?
Well, it's supposedly one of the most haunted places in America. So I called an editor I wrote for at the New York Times, and I said I want to go spend a night there. And when I called the asylum, because they give haunted tours there, they have a 9 to 5 tour, which is, I said, that sounds like a temp job. They said, no, it's 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. You show up and you stay there and you sleep if you're brave enough. But I said, I want to sleep in the most haunted part of the asylum. And they said, that's the lobotomy recovery room, because there's more lobotomies there than anywhere in the country. And it was, I think I was haunted by the ghost of asbestos, because it was so dirty and filthy. And I at first wanted to go. Thomas is very Catholic, my husband. His father was an altar boy at the Vatican. He was like, I will not go. He doesn't like that stuff. And then I was going to go with this personal trainer I had at the time, who he'd be at my house and I'd be doing like squats, and he would say like, baby, I just saw a ghost go by. He was going to come with me, like, oh, I love that. And then he called and said, I can't go, baby. I have an emergency Zumba convention in Miami. Like, there's such a thing. But I don't know, he had to go to Miami for a Zumba convention. No one wanted to go with me. And so Thomas said, I will go, but on 2 conditions. We buy a Bible and a cross. And so we didn't have a Bible and a cross on our West Village apartment. So I said, don't worry, I Googled, there's a Walmart 2 miles from the asylum. And we stopped on the way. There were tons of guns for sale, but there were no Bibles and no crosses. And so all night long, Thomas kept going like this. And he made us leave at 4 a.m. I said, where are we going? He said, there's a Motel 6 up the road in the mountains. I said, that could be scarier.
Yeah. But you felt a presence there. I remember you said it.
I mean, it felt just eerie and creepy there. Thomas definitely did, because he believes more in that. I just felt like it was a very strange, dark, not asbestos-ridden place, and it was a great experience. And he made us leave at 4 a.m. I would have held out, but he made us leave. It was so much fun, though.
Alice, was there another question? I love that story, John.
There's 2. One of them is for you, Kate, and John actually started to ask it, and it's about you have a new book coming out.
Oh yes, thank you. It's coming out the end of June. It's called The Second Husband, and maybe the second husband should meet her last affair. Somehow they seem kind of related, but it's about a woman who, she's in a new marriage. It actually takes place in Westport, Connecticut. So not all that far from the Ferguson Library. And she basically gets a knock on her door one day from the police from New York City. They've reopened the investigation of the murder of her first husband. And so suddenly this is going to definitely be like a tsunami wave on her new marriage. And the fact that she's remarried, she's been remarried for almost a year, and it's only 26 months after the murder of her first husband. She was a suspect originally, and now she realizes she's a suspect again. So it's, it's a psychological thriller about this woman, Emma Hawke, and just what happens to her as she goes through this process with the police. And she starts to question a lot of things, including maybe even her new husband. So I had fun writing it. And the main character, Emma, is a trend forecaster and a researcher. And so that was interesting for me because as John knows, we had somebody who was our trend forecaster and researcher at Cosmo, who I really loved, and I was always fascinated by her job. So I was inspired a bit by that to make the character do this. And so it was really fun. What was the other question, Alice?
This is, we usually get someone who types this in every single time, and it's like, what's on your bedside right now by your bed that you have to read? You can't go to sleep until you've read something, read part of it, read a chapter or two.
Kate, you go first.
Well, I always have a mystery going, literary fiction going, and nonfiction going, and kind of like a self-help book going at the same time. I know that's crazy, but I always do all four. And right now, I've been enjoying very much the Tina Brown book, The Palace Papers. It's a page turner, and it's about the monarchy, the current monarchy in the UK. And I'm also reading, in terms of the self-help category, a book that I just love. I read a book called Deep Work, but then I'm reading the book 4,000 Weeks that looks at what we do with our lives in terms of time management and a safer way to sort of look at the 4,000 weeks. If we're lucky, we're on the face of the earth. So that's been interesting too. I've loved that. John, how about you?
Well, I'm just finished Chris Bojalian's new book, The Lioness. He very nicely blurbed the cover of Her Last Affair, and I loved the book, The Flight Attendant, and I'm been a fan of his for a long time and a friend. And so just finished The Lioness. And then also my graduate school, when I was at NYU, my professor for many years was Ann Hood, the writer, and she has a memoir out that she sent me called Fly Girl, about her years as a flight attendant for TWA while she was becoming a writer. She used to write her books on the transatlantic flights after the passengers went to sleep. And she talks about those days, which was, for her, it was a real escape, and just a way for like someone in a small town, she dreamed of seeing the world. And she first did that by becoming a flight attendant. So she writes about that. And so those are two of the many books on the piles around my bed. Yeah,
it's so hard these days to keep up. I find that there's just a lot of books out there that I want to read. John, I did say I wanted to come back to something, and I really do. Strange But True, your second book, I just love that book, and it has been made into a wonderful movie that is now streaming, as we mentioned, on HBO Max. And it has just the most incredible cast. And I thought the movie was terrific. So I would, could you take a few minutes and tell us about it, and tell us about the cast too, because there are some really amazing names in this movie.
Fantastic. It's Brian Cox from Succession. It's Amy Ryan from Only Murders in the Building and The Office, and Gone Baby Gone, and so many other things. Ruby's barking. Greg Kinnear, we all know and love. Blythe Danner, and then the kids from, I don't know if any people have seen Made, Netflix's Made. That, did you watch that TV show? Margaret Qualley and Nick Robinson in that. So it's just a fantastic cast, and I have a little cameo in it. If you blink, you'll miss me. I will tell a little more about the movie, but I like to tell the funny story of my cameo that one day Thomas and I were driving on the Long Island Expressway, and like an unfamiliar phone number appeared up calling. I didn't pick up. I thought it was gonna be a robocall. Ruby, come on. And I played the message after it said, "We're calling from the wardrobe department on the set of your movie, Strange But True." And I was like, well, you know. And then they said, "We're trying to figure out for your character what wardrobe he would wear so we could call in clothing." And they said, "The part you'll be playing is an author speaking at a library event."
So are you wearing this outfit then?
I said, "You don't have to call in any clothes. That is my entire set, and just pack a bunch of clothes and we'll pick something." So I do that, and I flew up in the morning and I went straight to the set, and they went through my clothes and they picked a light blue, kind of a collared shirt like this one, and but it was a light blue. And then right before, it was shot in a library, and I was playing an author who speaks at a library, and Amy Ryan is the librarian. And right before I was about to go on, the wardrobe supervisor said, "Come here into the stacks of the library. I need to talk to you." I said, "What?" She said, "It's about your nipples. They're aggressive." And she said, "I have to tape them." I thought maybe it was all my years at Cosmo. My nipples got really aggressive. So lift my shirt. And Amy Ryan said to me, "You fell for that." She taped them. And then later, we were doing this thing.
Can I just ask, John, when she did that, did she work with an intimacy coordinator on taping your nipples?
No,
because
that
today
was
you have to do that, right?
Also, as the Cosmo editor, I didn't need that. But so at the end of the night, I went back to the hotel, and I remember the producer gave me a ride home and she said to me, "Do you want to get a drink at the bar at the hotel?" And I was at the hotel counter waiting for my room key. And just as they're handing me the room key, I said to the producer, "No, I just want to go upstairs, peel my nipple tape off." And fall back. But I had like 2 red streaks. But anyway, if you blink, you'll miss me. And it's a fantastic cast. And the film is about a family who loses their son after his high school prom. And, I lost my sister tragically after her high school prom in a different way than the boy dies in the film. And the title of the book is Strange But True, because it is one of those strange but true premises. 5 years after the boy's death, his girlfriend and prom date shows up pregnant and makes this announcement that she's pregnant with the dead son's baby, and she only slept with one person on prom night. And they did change a lot, as they do from the book. And so I always say to people, please read the book first, because I think then if you watch the film, you'll see the moments, the scenes in particular. My favorite scenes are the scenes that are most true to the book, like Brian Cox and Blythe Danner in the basement. There's that scene between them, which I was
Terrifying.
there, shot that, and it was such a great scene. And so the book is set in winter, which was important to me, but because of the budget, the film is in summer. And, I'm just grateful it was made. But I read a quote from Stephen King, who they asked him, what does he think of his adaptations? And he says, "See the book, I wrote that," and so then the film is for people to.
Well, John, a lot of people have terrible experiences if they have a book that gets optioned and then turned into a series or film, and they'll talk about it and say that they felt that they wish it hadn't happened. But your experience overall was really good, and I found the movie just a wonderful quality.
Thank you. It was it took a long time in the making, and I wrote the original screenplay for it, and I sold it to this company, Green Street Films, and they said, "We're going to make it right away." And then 12 years later,
Yeah.
really the company, I don't know if they disbanded, I don't know, I've lost track, but it was this young man in the room, was, I guess, an assistant at the time. He held on to it and had a passion for it. And I would see him over the years on book tour. He would come to events. His mom would come to my events in Connecticut because she lives somewhere nearby. And his name is Fred Berker, and he would say, I want to make 2 movies. One is Strange But True. The other is this musical about 2 kids in LA. And I was thinking, a musical movie about 2 kids in LA. And then he made it, and it was called La La Land. And then once he was able to do that, he was like, now I'm going to make Strange But True. And he did. And so I'm grateful it was made. And, you know, are there parts you wish were more like your book? Yes. But overall, the cast and the scene, so many scenes, and also a nice thing is I've stayed friends with a lot of people from that film, namely Amy Ryan, who hosted the launch event for Her Last Affair here in New York, and she's a wonderful actor and just a wonderful human being. And so it was a nice experience all around. So.
Well, everyone, if you have the opportunity, have HBO Max, I think you will love this movie. I know I did. John, we only have a couple more minutes, and I'm not going to ask you what your next book is about. You said you don't like people doing that, but I am just curious, is it great to move on to a new book after you've been so enmeshed in the PR and for the current one and the book tour and everything? Is it nice to clear your head and get into a different space?
It is. I'm trying to find a little more confidence in myself, Kate, because I spent the day yesterday with my neighbor and friend, the writer Adriana Trigiani, and I was joking with her because she's always outside with her garden hose spraying the sidewalk and kind of thinking about her writing. And I'll see her and she'll say, "Oh, honey, I'm writing a great book. It's a masterpiece. I love it." I'm like, I wish I had that confidence. And I said that to her yesterday. I said, I'm always like, can I do it? Like, until I get to the last page, I don't know if I can. So I often write from such a place of fear, but I'm trying not to really shift that in myself and think, well, I've published 4 books. I've written for the New York Times and Washington Post. I've like edited Cosmo with you for many years. So I think at this point I can say to myself, I have a master's degree from NYU in creative writing. I think I know. So I'm trying to like just find a little more self-confidence in myself, and it's actually helping, and it does feel good because I feel less afraid, and feeling a little more confident in it is allowing me to maybe go a little quicker too, which is nice.
Yeah, because by now the proof's in the pudding, John. But I know what you mean. I think that when you do something, even just anyone, you hear, my son played college tennis, and it's loaded with people who have self-loathing. These kids they beat up on themselves, and we all, no matter what field you're in, people suffer from the imposter syndrome, and certainly when you're doing something as solitary as what we do, it's hard not to get some self-doubts building over the course of the day. You think you did a good job, and the next day you reread it and you just think, what a loser wrote this. Whoa, who is this person? I hope I don't know her. And but I think certainly at this point in your career, you've written these 4 incredibly well-reviewed novels, and you're a New York Times bestselling author. And John, I'm just going to say to you, let go of the fear. There's no reason for it. Okay.
You always have the best advice in life. So Kate, I talked to her earlier today, and there were things Kate gave me advice about, like, when are you going to get married? When are you doing this? And I look back and I think, actually, Kate was right about everything. So Kate White, everybody.
Yeah. John, it's been so nice to talk to you in this capacity. We didn't get glasses of rosé like we said we did, but at least we're cold sober as we finish here. So John, thank you so much. And thank you to Ferguson Library. Alice, this was so great of you to do for us. We so appreciate it as authors. And as I mentioned early on, I'm the daughter of a librarian, and John writes about librarians. And so we are so grateful for all the support you give us as authors.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you to you, Alice, too. It is true what Kate says, libraries are so important. As a kid, I was so bullied. Before I didn't know I was gay, but the other boys did. And my hiding place was to go to the library. And that's how I discovered a love of reading, was there. So I'm always happy and grateful to do any sort of library event.
Yeah. And thank you for everyone who joined us. We really appreciate your support too.
Thank you. I cannot thank you enough. This was the most delightful hour. See me, but I was smiling the whole time. I feel like I've been with the masters here.
Alice, we wish you could have worked at Cosmo with us. Then you would be really howling.
For those of you who would like to be writers, we have a special event coming up for you on June 4th, again, sponsored by the Friends, called Crime Con. Our partners are Mystery Writers of America, New York City chapter. And then on July 13th, only in person, not to be recorded, will be David Baldacci. So I am so excited about tonight. I'm going to leave here tonight on a high, even though I didn't have rosé. And I'm looking forward to our upcoming events. Thank you. I cannot thank you enough. And one of
Thank you, Alice.
Barb Thomas, who has been with us for several years, is retiring. She tried to retire in February, but we've been only letting her go by dribs and drabs. So this is my special thank you out to Barb Thomas, who arranged for this special evening
Oh,
tonight.
I just love Barb so much, and I'm sorry she's leaving,
Oh.
but I've had such pleasure getting to know her over the years.
Congratulations, Barb.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Alice. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Okay.